For all those who are wondering, he did not immediately swoon, but he did say there was a really good cookie and that he would like to have some for his birthday party. So
So
now's
that was
my grandma a
excellent
client.
marketing for a business, if anything else, which honestly might have been better. He may have been a terrible first
He
boyfriend,
was.
you know? Welcome back to Sprung on Food, an interview based show where the overall topic of conversation is food. I'm your host, Kae Sprung. This season, I'm talking to food content creators, and my next guest is Chef Elise Smith. Let's get into the show. Elise is the pastry chef and founder of WinniE's Bakery and oECo Studios, an eco-sustainable video production company. She's a published recipe developer and food writer with over 10 years working in the food industry. She's also the host of her cooking series, Baked from Scratch Cakes, on the Magnolia Network. And her work has been featured in People Magazine, Edible DC, PBS, and Baltimore Sun, to name a few. Elise, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am very excited that you are here, a fellow dessert person. So I'm pretty pumped. Now, with your bakery, it is called WinniE's. And if people have not had the pleasure of meeting you yet, have not worked with you before, I know a lot of times that there can sometimes be confusion and people think that your name is Winnie, but the namesake
Yeah.
is actually from your grandmother. So I would love
Mhm.
to know if you have any fond food memories with her.
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. Countless. I think my favorite story about her to tell is because I have photographic evidence, and she was making an apple tart, and she was like giving me little jobs to do because she always called me her partner, and I took it very seriously, but I was also still just like 6. So she kept putting me, like, onto the side of her, but I kept climbing into her lap, and, I think that was one of, like, the first moments where I realized I think I could do this forever. Like, the amount of just interest and joy, like, even at 6, I was just like, yeah, like, I remember it was daytime when we got there and when I started, and when we left, like, it was, like, so late that, like, we fell asleep in the car ride home. Like, that's how much I loved doing that type of stuff with my grandma. Um, it's pretty cool to grow up being able to tell kids, "Oh, yeah, my nana has a bakery." So that's definitely one. Um, Also probably me making cookies for a boy I like, she thought that was a really good idea, and she, like, pumped me up, and I was, like, 11,
Grandma's your
and
wing
she's just like,
woman. Yes. She's like, let's bake him cookies. You've got this.
"Yes." She was
Do you
just like,
remember
"We
what
will
kind of cookies
totally
they
win
were?
him over." Oh, absolutely. So I made him snickerdoodle cookies, and I just really thought that was gonna be the thing that made him like, because I had her to hype me up and, like, just instill that confidence, I really thought so, and no, for all those who are wondering, he did not, immediately swoon, but he did say there was a really good cookie and that he would like to have some for his birthday party. So,
So
now's
that was
my grandma a
excellent
client.
marketing for a business, if anything else, which honestly might have been better. He may have been a terrible first
He
boyfriend,
was.
you know?
Oh my
We don't
gosh.
know. How old were you again?
No. I was 11.
11. Okay. So
Yep.
I think instilling some entrepreneurship at 11 is much cooler than dating an 11-year-old, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yes.
no, he definitely had some peculiar habits upon
Oh,
I've always been the type where if it doesn't work out, like, I shut down and move on. So when he was like, "I'm not interested," I immediately was like, "My feelings are
me
hurt."
either.
Okay. Like, right, like, I'm done, I'm over it. And I remember telling my grandma, and she was just like, "Baby, it wasn't worth your time."
Your rose-colored glasses were lifted and you saw
I
what the
know.
situation really was and it was not that serious. And all the while, you gained a new customer.
She really did make cookies for him, so it worked out.
Listen, yeah, you were each your own person's wing person. Like
Oh, I love that.
she was like, "Oh, let's get him. Let's get some cookies for him." And then he was like, "I'm not reading between the lines, so I'm not sure if you're alluding to anything else, but these are delicious cookies, and I would like to place a further order." And you were like, "I got you." You were like,
At
"Grandma,
11. Oh,
you
man.
started early." It's
Uh,
amazing. The foresight and the team, the duo.
yes.
I
It is a
I think you
lot of
nailed it.
you'll find, like, in the stories that I share with you and the pictures that I have, there's a lot of instances of me bringing baked goods to school. A lot of them.
A and was it did it stem from you just thinking or wanting or there being a need to do it? Or did your grandma
Mm.
say, "Hey, this would be great for you to do"? Where did that inspo come from?
Well, I'm a very type A type person. I think all of us will fixate, but I tend to hyperfixate on the things I'm interested or passionate about. And, I was just so wrapped up in everything that she was doing. She was always sharing with others. And I guess like a mundane moment became like a whole thing. And I always just wanted, I'm big and dramatic, intense and gregarious, and I was, like, always looking for a moment. And I was just like, "Oh, well, people delight when I bring in baked goods, and I love making the baked goods." So that was one thing. I am the baby of brothers, and so making friends or, like, things like that were never really an issue because I had learned a lot of necessary social skills from those 2 fools. Um but I will say it helped me kind of find my people. Like, you lean in hard with, like, that's something that's very unapologetic about you. Like, when you're passionate and you know something like that you're passionate about as a kid, but maybe it's not something that many other kids do, it definitely helps you find your people. So that is something that I started to lean into. I noticed that when I would bring in food and talk about food and what my grandma did and how much I loved it, it would kind of spark, other people to share about like things they did with their grandmother or like, oh yeah, I like to make these weird creations because this started when I was in like middle school. I like to make weird creations with like bagel bites when I get home from school.
What are
Um,
these weird bagel bite creations?
Okay, so there was one girl, she used to crush up Cheetos on top of her bagel bite. She thought that that was, like, such a great finisher, and I was
I
like,
mean,
"That
she's
sounds
kind of not
great."
wrong.
Right. I was like I mean, we were talking to 11 and 12-year-olds, like, I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, are you kidding me? That sounds fantastic." Um, and so just, like, even then, knowing the value of finding your people, I guess, is kind of what prompted me to keep going. And it's also just a really easy way to share the less fragile parts of yourself and like just find a way to connect with people. And also like food just brings joy, dude. Like you bring something in. I brought to um so I went to community college and then went to Gallaudet and we had finals for my ASL interpreting for class and I mean it's a hard class. There's only 5 levels taught. And so there is definitely an immersive period. You do have training that you have to do where you become RID certified, registered interpreter for the deaf. It's a national organization. Anyway, long story short, it was a really wonderful class, but it was a really intense class. And I kept telling everyone I hadn't started my business yet, but I kept telling everyone I was like, well, I've been baking, I've been doing this, da 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 da. And I was like, I'll bring in some some cupcakes. And I did. I brought some the last day of classes and it was absolutely incredible. Everyone loved it. And they were gluten free. I was still testing like gluten free. My mom had a gluten allergy and there was a girl in my class with a gluten allergy. I was like, "Oh, girl, I got you." I did not know if I had her. I like tried 7 batches out on my mom. Um, so that for me has just always been like an easy way to connect with people. Um, I'm a very cerebral person. I enjoy talking with people, but um, I spent a lot of my childhood dealing with chronic illness, and so some of the things that my peers dealt with acceptance and things, I dealt with some of the same things, of course, but really having parts of my childhood and adolescence so far removed from my peers made it so that I feel very at home living in my own mind, and the way that I see myself and how I navigate the world might be different from people who are the same age as myself. And so I was like, well, just like tiptoe and like dip my toe in the water and see if like people are cool with the fact that like I'm a nerdy kid who loves to bake and bring dishes, like casserole dishes and stuff. So it just kind of just
Wow.
kept going.
Like whole meals. I don't know any kid would be like, "No, no, no, no. I don't want free food. That's also delicious." They would have issues and you would have to stay far away from them.
Yes. I'd be like, I'm
Like,
sorry, you don't want what?
I mean, but gluten-free, I do know, and that was an excellent, point that you made, is one of your
Mhm.
specialties, gluten-free baking,
Yeah.
which I think sometimes a lot of people who are not, versed in that capacity might have some difficulties with. Do you have any good tips or hacks when it comes to gluten-free baking?
Mm, absolutely. So I have a lot of, and I won't name drop for the sake of,
No free
how
pub.
this is set up, but I will say there's some really wonderful brands. So my mom, I'm 34. So my mom has been gluten-free for 19 years.
Mm,
And for her, my mom was never a huge sweet person, which is kind of crazy. And I'm gonna say something controversial. Neither am I. I'm a big believer in dessert, but I'm very particular. I don't like just everything sweet. And
right,
so all
okay.
that to say, it didn't feel like she lost that much when she went gluten-free in the realm of dessert because it
Right.
wasn't that important to her. Um, but there were a few things that she really missed. And so I kind of made it my mission to figure out if I could make those things. Um, One thing that I'm still working on is gluten-free bagels. They taste delicious. I feel like they're too dense. Um, but
Mm.
anyway,
And why do you
one
think
of the
that
simple,
is? Because you
ooh,
also do recipe development,
I
so do you have
do.
foresight into why? Okay.
I do.
Or is
So
that a
a
secret?
couple of
Proprietary information?
slightly, but I will say
Okay.
I dabble between some trusted brands that I really love. Do your research, you'll find them.
Uh-huh.
Some
Mhm.
trusted brands. I have like 2 or 3 that I really love, and I just think the overall understanding of what they're creating is absolutely incredible, as well as I create master flours of myself. When I'm looking to do something that's more sumptuous and fat rich, like I might lead with like a coconut flour. Coconut can be gritty, but the fat lends itself to helping to bind things and having just a really great mouthfeel. I have a gluten-free crepe recipe that I really love, and I wanted it to have such a really great velvety full mouthfeel. And so I leaned in heavy to the coconut flour, but it was actually a little bit too much. So I actually had to back off. So I incorporated quinoa, oat flour, and coconut flour, and it gave the most velvety texture. But I just had to keep playing with it. Um, and it
How
was
long
really exciting for me.
how long can a process like that, I know there's so many variables and it's very subjective, but how long can a
Hmm.
process like that take when there's no direct blueprint and it really is
Hmm.
just the development process and a lot of trial and error? Maybe what's like the
Yeah.
longest it's possibly taken you? And are there ever times where you are out to try to achieve something and like
Hmm.
have you ever had to just like lay it to rest?
Yes, absolutely. I
Mm,
love that you use that term too. I'm actually a really big believer in laying it to rest because something about this whole equation isn't working, whether it be me, whether it be the ingredients, whether it be the season, my mind space, whatever it is. I'm a big believer in setting things down. That doesn't mean you have to forget about it, but just like taking that time to go live or let your mind go somewhere else and like have a win per se with something else so that it feels like the creative juices are flowing. Um, and so it's funny that you say that. You asked this question, that recipe. So I developed it for should I say?
I mean, unless, you signed an NDA, yeah.
No, no, no. Yeah, yeah. So I developed the crepe recipe for Well and Good, and it was taking me like a minute. It really was. Typically when I test a recipe, I can get things down in probably about 4 tries or less. I did that crepe recipe about 7 times.
Hmm.
So that
See
took
that,
me
but
about,
still, that doesn't even sound that aggressive to me. That still sounds
ooh,
impressive to me. I
thank
know
you.
7 probably felt rough to you, but to
Oh my
me,
gosh.
7 sounds like a win.
Thank you. Thank you. I think why it felt so challenging is because, as you and I both know, like it's a very simple technique, you know? And so once you learn how to make a crepe, for it to be so challenging with what doesn't seem like that much of a new medium, finding out which ratio of flour. And it was challenging, but for me, it also, and I won't deny I got very frustrated at one point, but it also acted as kind of a reminder that like there should always be this sense of curiosity and expansion, like always learning in our profession. And I'm really grateful for that because when I talk to friends sometime, I'll catch up with them and I'll be like, "Oh, what's new with work?" And they'll be like, "Girl, nothing." And I'm like, "Oh, I always have something new and kind of exciting or something I find interesting in the work that we do." So I'm always really grateful for that type of stuff.
That's very beautiful, but and not but and
Yeah.
I am curious to your point about using the crepes as an example, when it
Mhm,
comes to recipe developing for somebody else rather than for yourself, for your own project
mhm,
and your own bakery, what is that, if there is, which I'm assuming maybe yes, added pressure like? And what happens if, for whatever reason, things are taking longer or they're not coming out how you want?
mhm,
What is that kind of process like when you're working with a publication or a client
mhm.
versus just for yourself?
So you already said it right in the question. There is definitely a
Oh,
lot more inherent pressure.
yeah.
Um, I feel pretty confident in my workflow now, but what I will say is probably the thing that I keep coming up against, which you wouldn't think, right? But if you stop and kind of dissect it, it makes sense. Not everyone who works in publication, particularly food publication, knows anything about food. And so,
Right. But then I think about the reader. Well, this is for the people, right? Like,
mhm,
yes, you're working for the publication who hopefully is also testing the recipe themselves too to kind of vet that
yeah,
out and doing their due diligence. But then I'm thinking at the end of the day, it's left into the hands of the people. And they're the ones
it
who are
really
going to
is.
look at the
Yeah,
recipe, try it, and then think of like, oh, this is the person who wrote it. Oh my God, they are amazing because this is delicious. Let me see what else they're up to. Or it could go the other way
yes.
around when they're like, they make it and or no thanks.
I, s-
This wasn't
I
good.
saw
You know
this
what I mean?
video the other day. I totally know what you mean. And it's very reminiscent of what you just described. And it made me laugh. Um, I'll have to send it to you. But basically, it was a video and it makes a little blink blink sound like blink blink. And it's just like not me being surprised the recipe didn't turn out at all like it said when I didn't have that ingredient and I
I
improvised
can
this
totally
and I
visualize
definitely
that.
let it cook twice as long. But yeah, getting back to like not everyone who works in publication actually works in food or understands food. I was talking with a really great publication once, and my point of contact, I was pitching recipes, and I had said something along the lines of maple and orange, and it was during the cold season, and they were like, "Oh, but we want to have seasonal offerings," and I was like, "Citrus." When its most organic process was like, it is a winter produce. And they were blown away. They're like, "Oh, let me check." And I was like, "Bitch, like
I
really?
mean,
Why did you hire me? It's my job to know these things." And so that was like really frustrating. You deal with people who because of marketing have an image. Like that people perceive lemons because they have a pretty decent shelf life and they're fairly easy to grow. Lemons, there's a surplus. However many years ago, people are like, let's market lemons as fresh in springtime and, summery and this, that, and the other. But that's not when they organically grow. It's because of how uh, our industrial food industry has been set up that we have certain foods year round. And so there are people who don't know who even work in this realm. That's, I think, definitely one of the like most frustrating parts of my job is that some of the people who can say yay or nay to things don't actually even fully know um
Mm.
all that goes into the process. But in terms of so that can get like a little difficult in terms of like timeline and working. um I know my workflow pretty well, and so I feel really confident, but I will say it definitely, and tell me if you've experienced this. A lot of times I feel like media companies, production companies, and publications, they want to shoot for the moon, but they want to operate on a bookie budget. One, and two, they feel like you can turn things around. I was like, food is a process and you can't rush it no matter how much you want. Like if something takes 4 hours, it takes 4 hours. So let's say we're billing me out for probably somewhere between like 3 and 8 contact hours, depending on how many dishes I'm doing. I was just like, what you're wanting for how quick a turnaround? I was like, that's going to cost you double. And so then you start stressing about having to stand up for yourself and
Hmm.
expressing and like hand holding these people through what the actual process is. That's that's the hard part. Like no one tells you that you have to be an entrepreneur and you have to have really strong boundaries and you have to have very evolved and, a certain level of maturation in your communication skills, and you have to be your own advocate and your own marketer. Like it's just a lot that is a part of the process before you even get to the food. Um
Yes. Yeah, there's a
yeah.
huge I think there's a huge educational component and a learning curve when it comes to uh processes. And I think also on the side of it, the client side,
Hmm.
not always, but oftentimes the larger that they are, meaning
Hmm.
the more people that are involved in the process, the more confusion
Hmm.
that there can be and the slower the understanding is, because they're far more removed from the actual
Yes.
process and understanding. The one thing that comes to my mind is there was I will say a potential client, because they did not end up to become one, who
Hmm.
wanted to do a shoot, and so wanted to hire me to do the photography and the food styling, and
Hmm.
that is fine,
Hmm.
but they gave the budget and the time or the turnaround that they needed, and I
Hmm.
said, "No, no, that is not going to work, because how long you think this will take in your mind's eye, we're
Yes.
not shooting with an iPhone. We have to actually make the food, we have to style it, then you have to clear set. There's a whole process, and I could do a whole
Yes.
other podcast about that. But um, but it is not just showing up at a restaurant who has prepared the meals and you're just shooting
Yes.
some photos on your iPhone. Great, and then
Yeah.
you can just edit it. There is a process,
Yeah.
and to be able to execute in the time that they needed, I would have had to hire an assistant, which is extra money too,
Exactly.
and
Team of
and
one. That's a lot.
it's a lot, and I said, "If you had this budget and this amount of time, I could do it for you." And,
Yeah.
yeah, they walked, and I'm assuming they found somebody, and that's great, but that's just to your point, is understanding the value of the time, the work,
Yeah.
and the experience that you're getting, and realizing that it may be different from what you're hoping.
Yeah. No, and so much to that point, I think mm, I worry about the people who are out there just making it happen all the time, like always making it happen. I think all of us have to have a sort of tenacity, a tenacious spirit to be able to kind of pull something out of the hat that maybe we didn't expect. Like it's full court press, like there's no turning back. We've already signed our name. We got to make it work, right? But when you're always just like making it work or making it happen in relation to the example you gave. So like you gave them practical numbers, a timeline, a budget. Like this, what you want is not going to be sustainable. Like I can't support that for you, right? They went out there and they found someone who could do it. And I'm like, that segues into something I hope that we get to talk about is that I worry about those who are wrecking the industry in what these publications and production companies can have as like a baseline of expectation.
Mhm.
Um,
So let's
because
talk
I
about it.
mean,
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, all of us have to find, and it's different for everyone, and none of us get it right all the time, but like work-life balance, right? I also know that so many of us really, especially entrepreneurs, like when we're really locked in, like we're committed to this, like you have to really schedule life out. Like we are the ones who are making every single thing happen. And, let's just say we have like 6 dishes that need to be prepared, they need to be styled, they need to be shot. Then you're going to have to make sure you got everything. Then you also have to be dishwasher. Then you have to wrap, you have to edit, and get approvals. Like that's just the first round of things. You may have to do this again. And that for me, 6 dishes would probably, if it's just me, that'd be broken up over 2 days. I do 3 and 3. If I was particularly busy, I budget for 3 days. Um, but there's someone out there who like stayed up and like got no sleep for like probably 30 hours trying to make that work. And I worry that these companies will continue to believe that that is the norm when it is not. It's wildly unhealthy. It's not sustainable. And we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to. It's really sad that these places often do have that level of expectation. I'm sadly finding more and more of that where they have this unrealistic expectation of turnaround. If I feel like they're the type of publication who has like a lot of turnover and like they turn things around really, really quickly, I just go in very honestly and I'm very cognizant of what language I use and let them know that I have other clients and things need to be appropriately, scheduled out. Um, so yeah, it's definitely something to be navigating.
Well, and I think it's important too to talk about these things and also give that transparency for people who are coming up in the space or
Hmm.
curious about these different types of roles because sometimes there can be a lot of crossover too. Not every food photographer also does food styling and vice versa,
Yeah.
but sometimes for certain clients and with certain budget, you need to be able to do both. And then it is just about being realistic and setting those expectations and advocating for yourself. So like conversations like this and the messages that you talk about too are these important topics to where people who are new in the game need to
Hmm.
understand these things, and we all make these sacrifices in the beginning where there I feel like there are two camps out there,
Yeah.
and you can correct me if you feel otherwise, but
No, I'm sure you're
there's
probably,
one that says don't ever do free work. Don't ever do free work. And then there's one that
yeah.
says, yeah, do free work to get better work and to build yourself and your portfolio.
Yes.
I see both sides. I have
Yeah.
absolutely done free work. I have done free
Yeah.
work to then in hopes of doing a great job and booking more work
Yes.
and dipping your toe in the pond. That does not mean
Yes.
do free work all the time or lower your value once you
Mhm.
secure a paid job
Yes.
just to do it. It just has to feel right, and then
Absolutely.
sometimes it's just a learning game, and you agree to do certain things that in retrospect you're like, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So it's there's a ton of trial and error, and I think you just have to navigate and then get the best direction that you can. So even things
Yeah.
like you've said are very helpful in that way because it opens up perspective and understanding what some things could look like, what is okay to do
Yeah.
and what should not be. So I think
Yeah.
it's important.
I would say to, future generations, to whomever may be listening, one of the best things that I could ever recommend is building like a sense of community, especially if you're not working
Yes.
in kitchens anymore and you work in food and you're doing more of a freelance entrepreneurial based kind of area or space that you're building within the food industry is create a sense of community. And when do collaborative work, it'll be good for your spirit, but it'll also be good for your business. If you show people your worth ethic, your heart, they will more than likely want to attach themselves to you and share with others what you do or bring you on. And I'm a big proponent of that. I met, so I had oECo Studios, which is an eco-sustainable production company. And I met my lead videographer because I did an interview with WJZ, and that's a local news station here in the Maryland area. They're
Oh, for a
outside of
second, I
Baltimore.
thought it was like Sean Carter's radio station that I hadn't heard of.
Stop,
Like they only serve
stop.
Ciroc there. Is that his Ciroc? Is that what he serves, or is
Yeah,
that somebody
that's
else's? Okay.
no, you got it right. You
Yeah.
got it right.
Okay. Okay.
And it was so kismet. It really, really was. I needed someone to shoot video because I have a production background, but being behind the camera is still new to me. I shoot all my own photography and I create my content, but working for large brands, shooting for large brands was something that was new. Long story short, he was the news photographer, which is just an old term. She had a camera, a video camera. And I was just so taken with her. I could not believe how on top of everything she was, how kind she was, but like very firm. Like she was ran a tight ship. She kept them. I don't even know that that's, Trinice's responsibility to keep the time, but she did. And she was great. And long story short, I brought her on and we have done incredible projects together. We've worked for wonderful companies. And so much so that I had the great fortune to go out to Los Angeles last year and be on the Jennifer Hudson show, and I brought her with me. And when I found out I got the job for Magnolia, we went down to Waco together, and I brought her with me. And that's what I mean when I say find your community, find your people. That is when I would really encourage the free work because you're all lending in your time, your effort, your resources. For like a collective benefit. Um, that would be my only little bit of advice, if you will. My big
Well,
sister advice.
and how did you or would you suggest ways of facilitating this community finding? Where do
Yes.
people look? How do they find these
Ooh,
opportunities or these people?
well, I am a more I feel restored by extroverted things, but I would not classify myself as an extrovert anymore. But I think it's important for me to state that because that not everyone's going to have such an innate comfortability with, just reaching out to people or saying hi to people.
Because
Um,
I'm actually
so
selfishly asking for myself because I am very introverted and it's very hard for me sometimes to connect with people in large spaces. And one-on-one,
admittedly,
yes, and one-on-one, I discussed this with another guest that even sometimes when I am bold and I will send a DM to somebody, maybe
mhm,
wanting to collaborate or just even, trying to form a connection, they don't respond. It's fine.
yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
I've been there.
so I'm going to the school of Elise right now, and I'm taking mental notes.
Okay. So if it makes you feel better, that actually happened to a network mate of mine. Like I sent out a message, I won't say who, but I sent out a message before we were on the network together and they followed
Oh,
me
awkward.
prior to also that was so awkward. So they had followed me prior to this was like maybe 2 years before, and I sent out a message just saying, "Hey, I'd love to, pick your brain, see if there's anything, that you would like to impart to me, because I think your work is incredible." And they do. Like, this is no shade. They actually are really incredible at what they do. They turned out to be a lovely person as well. But don't feel bad for not getting responses because you know how you can see seen? I definitely saw that they saw it and then
Hmm.
never, ever said anything after that. So I feel
Mm.
you. Um,
There's a new feature, so anybody who
oh, you
wants
can
to
turn it
partake in
off?
this, because yes, and I have, because I'm just like, I can't deal with the pain of knowing that somebody saw something and didn't reach back out to me anymore. So it was more for
Yeah.
my for my mental health.
I
But
actually
also,
understand that.
yeah, I was like, you know what? I just in my world of delusion, I just want to pretend you never saw it, and then I don't feel badly
Yes,
about myself.
of course. There's no way
Yeah,
that they would look at that and then ignore it. No. Um,
I don't
I
know.
think
We'll have to ask them, but no names, so I don't know. It's fine.
I think for me, what really worked was two things primarily. So when I started my business, my primary like focus was weddings. Weddings is really like was the catalyst. It got me off the ground. That's actually what my grandma became really famous for. Um, I'm realizing now that I'm saying grandma because you said grandma, but I don't call her grandma and it sounds weird in my mouth. So my nana.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
my nana is, that was something that she was really famous for. She had these like very 80s, like huge multi-layered cakes. And my style is not that, but I did learn from her from doing like cater waitering with her and just like working weddings and events. That's a really great way to foster a sense of community. So for me, what I would do is when I'm meeting with a couple, I would be like, "Oh, well, who's your vendor roster?" And they would share with me, and I would send out little emails and introduce myself and be like, "Hey, I'm Elise. Da, da, da. This is what I do. Look forward to meeting you in person. If you have any questions or you want to get any like specific photos of the cake or anything like that, let me know. Reach out. I'd be happy to accommodate that." So that was one way that I was able to foster a sense of community.
They just gave you their lists?
But yeah, I mean, couple's hiring me as well, so and
Okay.
it's
That's
someone's
that's
email.
amazing. Yeah, you can always ask, but yeah,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I
Like
guess.
some people
Oh, oh yeah.
gatekeep their stuff, you know? So,
Yeah, just reaching out to people, or even if you don't ask your couple prior to the wedding, introduce yourself. Like you're at the wedding, you have to set up, go and say hi to the live painter or the DJ or the calligraphy artist or, people who are attending the bar. Like make those connections because more often than not, depending on where you live, so some markets are bigger than others, you're going to run into these people again. So take it upon yourself. Like you want something. People need to be honest. Like you want something, right? You want to have a connection with this person. You want to broaden your work network. Well, it's going to take something of you, and it might be the thing that makes you uncomfortable, but more often than not, you're going to get the result that you want. So it's worth it. And then, secondly, just show up at coffee shops, especially for what we do.
what?
It's a big win. Yeah. See,
Just
you
say,
live in New
"Hi, I'm here
York.
for my daily latte." And then what?
Yeah, just chat to people. That's my
Oh,
rule. The way that I go through like my world is that I'm either going to see you again or I'm not. I'm either
right.
going to see you again or I'm not. Like I tell my nieces all the time when I see them like look around in public, I'm like, girl, you don't know these people and you probably never gonna see them again. Like just so some
But
guy
then those are the ones that somehow you always run into again.
you know what's funny? I will say as you get older, I didn't realize how much like we are creatures of habits. So yes, it could be a little dicey, to go to a coffee shop that's
Proceed
your
with
favorite
caution.
coffee shop.
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe don't go. It's like trying to
A
make
new
certain
place.
connections like at your gym, you know, and then you have your
Ooh.
schedule and you go out you to your gym. Not that I have a gym membership right these days, but once upon a time. And yeah, so those are it's the same thing that they tell people about like don't date within your like gym or if you live in an
Oh, your
apartment building
workplace.
like your
Yes.
apart yeah, or your work, but yeah, don't. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just have some
It's not
separation.
it's not
Separation's
good.
nice. So, speaking of all of these different types of work within media, food media as a whole
Mhm.
has changed a ton in the past decade. I'm guessing in part to the rise of social media. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the changes that you've seen and what you kind of think the industry has experienced and where it may be heading.
Ooh, I have a lot.
Okay.
So again, opinion, not fact. I don't love it. I think I use this word a lot, but it's because it holds the weight of what it is. It's not sustainable, which is why there has been so much turnover in terms of trend. Like just the trend gap is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. The food industry since about the 90s became a very saturated market in general, and then add food media where it grew in prevalence just before the aughts, like the early 2000s. And, even the way in which we engage with audience by kind of building this familiarity with trusted, chefs and pastry chefs and leading industry experts, that sort of like fostered sense of trust is not there anymore. It's just like a free for all. Um, just about anyone and everyone who can create anything that looks good, um, or has a high number of followers, can have access to something that both you and I typically had to put in the legwork for, had to,
Mm.
create those connections and work on those shoots and do that grunt work. And,
What type of
it's,
people are you speaking about? Would this be like independent content creators on TikTok or something like that, or
I
YouTube,
would
or?
say primarily Instagram, YouTube, and
Mm,
TikTok creators, people
mm-hmm,
who don't really understand food. I saw a woman the
mm.
other day who says she likes to sear her chicken and she puts it in her microwave for like 10 minutes to let it sit with the heat.
Just hanging out like a sauna.
I was just hanging out with salmonella. It baffled me that only out of like, honestly, and I didn't scroll through all of them, but
Was this for
out of like,
clickbait? Was this like a clickbait kind of video though? Was she looking for like comments and hits? Because that
you
would
know
run with
what's so
that.
funny? She might have been, but no, she was just like, "This is how I do me," and I was just
Oh,
like, like even part
okay.
of her phrase was, "This is how I do me in my kitchen. You do you how you do your in your kitchen." I'm like, "No, but you're putting your kitchen out to like the 20 million people who are watching you. That is
Oh no, 20 million. Oh boy.
someone is going to catch salmonella because they're going to believe that that's how you cook chicken, or it's a way in which you can cook chicken." And chicken is already a dicey meat. Like you can't play with it. There's no wiggle room. Companies can't keep up with it. They also can't afford it. So they're getting people who are not
Hmm.
really qualified to fill these spaces. And, whole departments have been completely removed from companies. So this is a segue to the forced adaptation in our industry. But basically, I'm in the process of writing my cookbook and it's wonderful. And before, you just had to have a concept and perhaps some examples, and you had to have a pitch deck. Now you have to come with a whole marketing plan. There used to be whole marketing departments for books prior to the actual book. And most people like, oh, that makes sense. There's a book, they have to market it so they can make money. I'm like, no, no, no. There was a marketing department or a team within the marketing department that help you build out what would your marketing plan be should your book get picked up. And those are entirely gone. So then people like us are forced to take on roles outside of our wheelhouse. And it's quite honestly because like there's this unsustainable, not at all supportive like wheel that is going because of social media and none of them can keep up. They're like fixed within the old model and they haven't said, maybe we should start from scratch and figure out what we can do. Um, I think
Like, what could they do?
it's funny that you say that because I was just thinking, I was like, I'm not even sure exactly what they would do, but like, I mean, for
Does it?
starters, I would love to know. I've ghost written for people and I test for people. I think that that would be a really great route, in particular to food. If you have someone who's going to bring you the views, and if you have someone who can work behind the scenes with them, you and I have both done culinary producing. I think that might be a great band-aid. I don't think long term it's going to be entirely sustainable because the financials play an aspect and you're going to have to pay each party equally. Well, not equally, fairly. Um,
So would this
but
be so to clarify what you're saying, this would almost be in the same vein of in a movie set, somebody else being hired to do the stunt work. The
yes,
Okay, so somebody's there
knowing the
to be the face
limitations.
of something and bring in the
Mhm.
views, and the other
Yeah,
person there is the one that's kind of the puppet master.
yes.
There
And I don't know that
is
this
does
works
that
for
feel weird
everyone.
though to you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
It's
I because I
weird.
don't
It's
like
very
that.
weird.
Because then I'm like,
It's very weird.
why are we doing this then? You know?
Yeah. No, I've actually done it, and it
It
does
'cause
feel very strange.
it feels gross, yeah. Because
Yeah.
it to
It
me
doesn't
to yeah, there's then it even lends more to like, wow, how inauthentic this whole process can be rather than, wow, we like this person, whoever's
Mhm,
steering the ship because of their likability factor,
mhm.
and
Yeah.
then two, the skill set and the expertise that they hold. Because I
Yes.
don't think these are very, for a lot of people, these are very coveted positions to be in,
Yes.
and I think that it then feels like kind of icky
Yeah.
when a media company is like, yeah, because it ends at the end of the day, it's a business, right? Rather than
Yes.
an individual's channel, creator's channel,
Yeah.
where they're just doing their thing. It doesn't matter what their credentials are. If people are watching because they like
Right.
them or the content that
Right.
they're sharing, that's it. But when
Yeah.
somebody else adapts that, but then they need a full-on support system that's not hair and makeup, that's not,
Right.
different
Wardrobe.
things that are, yeah, uh,
Yeah.
likes, like, yes, obviously those are going to help your channel. But when it's the actual craft of it,
Uh-huh.
it's kind of a bummer. It's kind of a bummer.
It is, and it doesn't feel good to know that it was your hands. I mean, that it feels good when that check enters my bank account, but beyond that, it doesn't feel good to know that you were the person behind that and that someone else is now the face of all of that work, all of that effort. But what I will say as a counterpoint, as someone who has done this, how many people have you seen who already have platforms or who are already famous or who have the likability factor, and they're like, I've always dreamed of doing such and such. And just because
An alcohol brand.
everyone has a dream,
It's
right?
usually an alcohol
Everyone
brand.
has a dream. Just
Yeah.
because you have a dream does not mean that you have this inherent, like, like just
Eh,
access
right.
to doing that thing. I've seen, and so many people are multi-talented, but just because you're multi-talented does not mean that you are qualified to do it. There are so many people who have the camera presence, who are qualified, who are willing to put in the work, but there's been no opportunities because it's all saturated by people who already have an existing audience or who have already kind of brought in all the viewers or followers that, whatever production company, whatever media or publication company is looking for. They're kind of stuck at just staring at their nose, these companies. They don't want to look beyond it. They're like, yeah, it's great that you're this and you're wonderful, but we have this. Like, they're not even looking at what's over here anymore. Um, you know, if I see,
How do you think those people that do have aptitude and skill and all those things and do have the
Mhm,
desire to be in some of these positions, how do they get there when the whole format is changing
kind of rigged.
and the strategy is changing? What's that?
Oh, I was saying kind of rigged. Um,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
One, accept that it's rigged. Accept that
Acceptance is step number one.
it really is. It's gonna take a lot of the burden that you're putting on yourself off of you because that was
Mhm.
never your decision. You were not the one who rigged it. Like, just accept that that is an unfair thing that happens. And then 2, I would say it's really about making those connections. Be honest with people, be upfront about what you're looking for. So, if you are working a shoot and you're a production assistant and, you're getting along really, really well with the culinary producer on that shoot, make sure that you have some time to really exchange information about yourself. Tell them about some of your goals, some of the areas in which you want to work. If you're willing to travel, like, share with them things that make sense. And then lastly, just remember to turn around and do it for the next person. It's going to do nothing but feed your soul to know that you help someone do something or attain something, and it costs you nothing. I introduced myself to the entire production team at Magnolia and Discovery. And, I got to meet one of their lead writers, Lisbel Young, and she has a forthcoming book called Let There Be Havens. And it's been a year, or actually more for her, but for me, it's been a year waiting in the making. Um, but, one of my recipes is in that book. And it was all because I was like, "Hi, I'm Elise, and I really love your pieces, and I love your sensibility, and I love how you put so much of your heart into your work. I think I do the same." And it just kind of snowballed from there, and so like so many of the kind of incredible opportunities, that I had, that's kind of how Magnolia started. So they were already headhunting for regional talent, but um, I think I won over Joe, with my lemon lavender cake with honey mascarpone buttercream. Like it was just when I was
Was that
little,
like
I
in a
wrote
screen test or something, or
it was very irregular circumstances. So I had taken a break from Instagram because I had just got my cancer diagnosis. And long story short, walking my dog, I told my friend, to help me stay in touch. And I told her I had this great recipe, this new granola recipe that I really loved. And I put it out on like a Friday and I didn't do anything. And then I was like, well, she's like, I think you should check your Instagram. I've been getting notifications. And so, long story short, I check on Sunday morning and I see Joanna Gaines had seen the recipe and liked it. And I was like, what? How did this woman even find me? And so then I posted a video like, y'all, Joanna Gaines saw my recipe. And I didn't actually know who she was, except for maybe 2 or 3 years prior to that. My mom watched her, and then I started watching her when I would be with her. And so that's how I learned who she was. I was like, this one's a big deal. Like people lose their mind over this woman. And at the time, I was like, she just like signed some exclusive contract with Target. And I just shot my shot. I was like, hi. After I put that video out, like Joanna Gaines saw my recipe. She saw it again. I was like, if you'd ever like to bake together, cook, whatever, please let me know.
was this in the video
Um,
or this was in a DM?
this is a DM.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I save all those DMs because I think that's magic. Those are kind of like, the little stardust that lets you know you're on the right path. And
And she wrote
that
back, so that's great. You saw
she
scene and
did.
she wrote back.
And then I went down to Waco and I got to bake with her in the kitchen where she shoots her cooking show. And it was the most intense and awesome and lovely experience. You're going to have many times where people ignore it or it doesn't work out or they shoot you down. But like, what are you actually losing except for a fleeting moment of your ego to just ask for what you want?
You have nothing to lose. It's amazing. Such words of wisdom. It's incredible. How can people follow and support you? Plug away.
Thank you. I am most active on Instagram. I'm so behind the times. I do not have a TikTok. But you can follow me at WinniE's Bakery, all one word. We also have a Facebook. You can check in for updates on our website. And I look forward to I guess being in contact with all of you.
Amazing. Elise, thank you for sharing your story and spending some time with me here today.
You're so sweet. I'm very honored to have been on. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. You can find links and more info in the description below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. See you next time.